This video is a long time coming. People have been asking me more recently for this, but here it is. I'm going to share with you my story, how I became where I am today, why I think it may be important and provide some hope to you all. I'm like a lot of people, I'm my own worst enemy. I can be a perfectionist. I can even have that idea that why would anyone want to hear my story? But I think I've come to a more, I guess, mature understanding of how not only our words but our experience and sharing those experiences, especially from our heart, can really help and motivate. And if I honest with myself, when I look back when I was in my just really most painful places in my life, I was reaching out to. I was reaching out, trying to look for that guidance in those very, very confusing, painful places. And so I hope this may be a source of inspiration and hope for those of you at this time watching this. So really, I have to go all the way back to the beginning because my story started when I was a child with a childhood illness. And it was an illness that really most doctors couldn't figure out. There was a lot of fevers, there was a lot of inflammation in my body. This was well before the days of diagnosing autoimmune. But the doctor that I had at that time had this idea of just if I was to take my tonsils out, take the tonsils out, take the adenoids out, maybe that'll help with the inflammation, help with all the painful symptoms that I was experiencing. And that started probably for me around 4 or 5. And who knows why that occurred. I have my own understanding and interpretation why that was, and I may explain that later, but let's get into more of. So after I got really sick and my tonsils were taken out, adenoids taken out, like probably a lot of you also experienced, it didn't get better, it only got worse. What I was experiencing decided to go more deeper into my body, to the deeper layers, into my nervous system, into my brain. And it wasn't very long after experiencing that surgery, I started to develop seizures. And they manifested mostly my right arm, but really my whole body would go into a state where I was completely aware. If anything, I was hyper aware of my surroundings, but my body would go into this ultra sympathetic mode where it was so revved up that I couldn't move. So I was like frozen in this state while the seizure was happening and being acutely aware of everything that was happening. This happened a lot. I had seizures at some point. They were happening very frequently, like every 15 minutes. My parents, to the best of their ability, freaked out and trusted the doctors, and they sent me to the hospital. I was in and out of the hospital quite a bit, tests, trying to figure out what was causing the seizures. They put me on very intense medication. Some of that medication made me just feel very drowsy, sleepy. Some of it seemed to help initially, but then it actually got worse. And I had allergic reactions that almost killed me. My body went into a complete, almost like comatose state with all this rashing, hives all over my whole body. Thankfully, I had a pediatrician at that time that had the upright wisdom to say, take him off everything. And so they took me off all medication. And what happened was my seizures slowly started to go away. Till this day, I still don't know why, but as I matured into my adolescence, remind you, this was an incredibly confusing time. If anyone's ever had a child that has experienced some kind of strange neurological disorder like a seizure, it is terrifying. Not only is it terrifying for the parents, but everyone involved, including myself as the one that was experiencing it. And that experience gets absorbed into the nervous system as these micro traumas. I had already lived in a household where anger, rage, trauma was pretty frequent. And so that was a whole kind of maybe emotional, spiritual journey in its own. And that may be one of the reasons why my body was going through some of the changes and reactions like it was. But thankfully, as I moved into adolescence, my life started to normalize. I ended up moving to a new place, a new town, and I wasn't having seizures, wasn't having any symptoms or sickness. I started to feel normal. I had friends and played sports and actually got pretty good at sports into high school, and then graduated with a scholarship to play baseball. And it wasn't very long after that, maybe a few years after that, some of the symptoms started to creep back. And they creep back in a very different way. And they creep back in a way of like these horrific panic attacks where it felt like, my chest was just like getting just pushed in so intensely where I couldn't breathe. And it caused this waves of intense panic that would flood me. And all I can remember is I just wanted to get out. I just wanted to get out. Like I remember wherever I was, I just wanted to get out. Like give me something that would help me get out of it. Now, the strange thing about my symptoms and my body in general, and some of you might relate to this, is the usual course of action that most doctors or protocols that would work on people would do the opposite to me. So if you gave me Tylenol, it wouldn't work the same way it would work on someone else. If you gave me Benadryl, I would actually have more reaction. So a lot of the things that doctors would give me would make my symptoms even worse. And this is, as someone who has experienced this, you might resonate, like it was terrifying. It felt like there was no hope, no solutions available to me. And it was in this very depressed, closed state that I had to muster up the will within myself to decide to make a change. Now, I had already done some things like that throughout the earlier course of my life, but this was a biggie. This was like recognizing that the system that I had been conditioned to believe was going to help me was not. If anything, it was making it worse. So I had to reach out and find something different in this state. And thankfully, someone referred me to a local acupuncturist. And wow, within one session, I felt like I had been depossessed by something that had been living inside me. All of that panic, all that anxiety just like within one session had moved out of my system. It was at this moment in my life I realized a fascination for this type of medicine, this type of philosophy, how I was just so curious to all these connections I was having with it. And it really worked for me. So I decided to go out and study it. And I went to study Chinese medicine. I got my master's in it, but the year that I went to do my clinical, we had to get vaccinated with the Hep B vax. And I didn't know it at the time, but I had a reaction. I had actually an injury from the Hep B vaccine. It caused a lot of uncertainty what was going on at that time, but basically what had happened is I received, it comes in 3 doses. The first dose I got, I just felt very off, and wasn't till much later started to understand that it was my digestion, my liver function that had been compromised by this vaccine. I started to notice that certain foods that I normally was no problem digesting, all of a sudden I couldn't digest. Fats, especially. But I didn't know that at the time. It wasn't until much later that came to me. So I went on, completed my training, started my practice. As my days went along, I thought life was great, starting my practice, starting a family, recognizing I had some dietary issues, but wasn't clear the full extent of it. It was around the same time that I had, I guess there was no tick bite, but I had received Lyme disease. So it was the combination of the vaccine injury with the Lyme disease and all my previous childhood stuff, because that didn't completely resolve. That just got stored deep into latency in my body. Well, guess what? That all came out. One of my greatest fears was, as I got older, that the seizures would come back. And that happened. And it felt like my whole world that I thought it was, just felt like it was evaporating in front of me. And I had no way of dealing with it. In fact, it was so painful that I was experiencing. The pain I had was neurological, along with the seizures. My heart hurt all the time. It was literally pounding out of my chest. If I went up a flight of stairs, I would almost pass out from the pain. Every joint in my body hurt. Like it felt like I was carrying around like 300 more pounds. I couldn't sleep. Something happened to my brain where when I would go down to sleep, I couldn't sleep. And I would have these periods of time where I didn't sleep for like 2 weeks. And then my body would just crash and I'd sleep. And then I'd go through that whole cycle again where I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. So my diet was slowly, the choices that I was having was slowly deteriorating daily as what I could eat. And trust me, I was doing all the things I knew and how from my study to help. Nothing was helping. I went to such a deep depression that there was moments I almost took my life. There was many days where I just wanted to just drive off the side of the road. And one day, as I was driving home, we lived on a dirt road, and the road could be kind of muddy depending on what time of year. I accidentally flipped my truck. And I remember hitting the side of the truck. Thankfully, I was okay, but it was such an impact that something woke up inside me. And I got out of the truck, and like tears coming down my eyes, down my face, sorry. And I went down on my knees and just prayed deeply for help. I had tried everything out of my resources to help, and I needed help from a higher place. And it was in that place I was called to follow certain things, do certain things. Specifically, I was asked to go see a particular practitioner, a famous Vietnamese practitioner who gave me a particular Chinese medicine that was very helpful, helped with my sleep, helped with my my eating, which took a lot of anxiety away out of the system. But I still had neurological pain. I still had seizures, not as frequently as I did as a child, but they were still there. And I got the inspiration to study Qigong, because I had already known some Qigong, but I really didn't practice it. So, because I was, younger and didn't see the importance of it. But at this moment, I recognized I had to make this my everyday life. That between the Chinese medicine and the Qigong, I would say about 70% of my issues went away. But there was always that last little bit, and that's when I really had to go deeper inside myself, recognize the traumas, the pains, all the things that I had carried. I, as a child, learned early on to absorb a lot of the pain around me. I wasn't very good at emoting it out. I would just take it in and internalize. So the rage would compound itself into me. The sadness would compound itself into me. And it wasn't until I reached my first coach that I recognized how much backlog of emotional pain and trauma that was there. And years of processing and unburdening my psyche really helped shift so many things. Not just in my physical body symptoms, but my heart and my spirit. There's so much anger, so much rage, so much sadness and anxiety that I lived with that I wasn't even conscious of, that I was able to move through my system, release, and that helped tremendously. I feel like when I went through that phase of it, so much of, it's hard to describe, but like my experience of love and joy felt like a pancaked. But once I was able to unburden some of these emotions, all of a sudden my joy felt more rich. My peace felt more abundant. And that exponentially allowed the healing process to speed up so fast that even things that I thought I was over would still be there kind of somewhere, they got resolved too. And so now here I am in my mid 40s. I feel like I've started a whole new life. I feel like I'm living the life that I never got when I was a 20-year-old or 30-year-old, experiencing life very differently. And I'm just so grateful. I was just saying with a client today, it's like the amount of happiness and joy and ease I feel with inside myself is something I didn't even know was possible. And that came through this process. It was not a linear path by any means. This was many, many years, right? But that is my journey. Maybe it's something you resonate with your journey. Maybe not. Maybe your journey's been quicker, but this has been my journey. And I really feel like, this is the calling that I have to work with folks now. Now that I'm on the other side, I have so much passion in my heart to help those that suffered like I did. And that's what I do in my healing mentorship. I coach people, the healing in the heart. I teach them valuable, powerful Qigong that can awaken their energy and heal some of the unprocessed messages that we all have in our unconscious. And then I use my background in Chinese medicine to help if there's anything I can do to help in the immediate, in the symptomatology. So if you're interested in that, you can look in the links below and check it out. But I really appreciate you all for listening, tuning in, hearing my story, and hopefully it hits home for you too and inspires and gives you hope. Because if I could walk through this journey, really in some ways, it did feel like I was I don't want to say I was alone, because I wasn't alone. There were many helping hands that happened along the way, but it was not a direct, easy route like most majority of people do when they get sick. They go to the doctor. For me, it was more of an exploratory route that, again, was not easy, but I feel like I've cultivated and developed things within myself that now can really help others in ways that maybe was not available for me. So thank you all. I appreciate you listening. This channel is dedicated to especially those of you that are suffering, and are looking for answers, literally like praying for answers on your knees like I was. And so it's dedicated for you to help get you the best guidance and answers. And that's what we do here. So please subscribe, like, and share it if you will. And as a token of my appreciation for watching this video and watching more of my videos and subscribing, go ahead and grab my free healing meditation below in the links and put it to use. It really helps. A lot of people get a lot of benefit from it. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next video. Take good care, everyone.